Welcome back, guys. With Donald Trump securing his second term in the 2024 American election, he'll be back in the White House for his second term, of course. So, I know many people have been asking, what will his foreign policy for America look like moving forward now? Well, let's take a look, shall we? So, the first area is going to be the US Europe relations and the NATO dynamics. Regarding NATO's commitments here, Trump has previously criticized NATO countries for insufficient spending, calling it a burden on US resources. Now, many speculate he could demand allies meet their defense commitments or face US withdrawal threats. Trump has stated in his approach that he has constantly pushed for burden sharing and may even consider withdrawing troops if allies don't contribute as they need to. I personally think Trump will push NATO alliance members to foot most of the bill now, especially since his America First policy focuses on taking care of the US before worrying about Europe and any other continent for that matter. This is why you'll see many European countries concerned about his second term in office. There's another point here, one that often goes unmentioned. The main reason America has footed most of NATO's bills throughout its history is due to how European countries manage their own internal structures. Now, what I mean by this is most European countries simply can't cover their costs themselves because they prioritize spending on healthcare and other domestic services, essentially budgeting for their own economies while relying on America to pick up the tab for them when they shouldn't. Regarding European security, Trump's stance could see reduced US involvement in Europe, shifting to the onus of defense to European nations themselves. Speculations here by some analysts suggest he may focus less on Eastern Europe, potentially reducing security measures around countries like Poland, for example. Now, I foresee that with Trump's America First policy and his claim that during his first term as president, there were no wars happening, and that he will bring reconfiguration to Eastern Europe now. However, I personally would counter that by saying Syria for obvious and or smaller reasons, but I digress. His impact on Eastern Europe may involve dialing back the intense NATO superiority rhetoric and maintaining some level of stability in the region, of course. American European relationships. Now, the special relationships with the UK and other European countries, Trump could deepen those ties again. Basically, what Trump's approach has often been advocating for strong bilateral ties, particularly with the UK, Germans, and the French regarding their leaders. Now, I'm not too sure if Trump will be more inclined to pursue a friendly diplomatic relations with the UK or any other left leaning Western countries that weren't particularly happy with them, especially now with the rumors about with basically the UK Labour Party supporting Kamala Harris on her campaign. Yeah, very questionable there. However, I do know other political leaders like Orban and Fico, who are right wing or lean that way, are far more enthusiastic about reestablishing genuine friendships and constructive diplomatic relations with America. The second is going to be relations with Russia and Vladimir Putin. Now, sanctions and the military presence. Basically, Trump has criticized sanctions on Russia as being unproductive and questioned their effectiveness. Speculation surrounds whether he might basically reduce sanctions in favor of a better diplomacy, or you could say better deal, as he is known for, may or may not happen. As Trump's past remarks, he has spoken of wanting good relations with Russia and avoiding unnecessary military buildups. Now, using sanctions as a weapon could become redundant, especially as the BRICS group develops and the world shifts towards a more multipolar structure. So, Trump might still want to maintain a US military presence in Eastern Europe, though, but that will depend on evolving priorities in America and Europe regarding who possesses the greater threat. For example, Russian expansion, China's control of the South China Sea, and the significant tensions between Iran and Israel. Decisions, am I right? So, the Ukraine conflict itself. Trump has expressed skepticism about long term US involvement in Ukraine, suggesting he could pursue negotiations to end the conflict. Analysts suggest Trump could reduce or redirect aid, possibly urging Europe to assume the greater role here. Now, in my opinion, it really is going to depend. on what the military-industrial complex and other influencers and or lobbyists in the US government have to say about it. Then again, if Trump and his cabinet manage to hold sway and truly uphold his promises to the voters, then perhaps something like that would be feasible. Now, I believe that if Trump and Putin could sit down on a negotiation table without Ukraine or Europe's diplomats in that room, they might find some common ground there. But ultimately, that would hinge on Putin's demands for such a peace deal. One last point. If Trump were to cut aid to Ukraine, it wouldn't mean Ukraine would collapse immediately. However, it would align with Trump's plan to make Europe take responsibility and fund the conflict itself, rather than America, shouldering most of the financial and equipment burden as it currently is. And it might ease things for Russia a bit, but who really knows, right? So, regarding energy policy implications, Trump opposed the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, though he's pro fossil fuel, of course, potentially complicating US Europe energy policies. Trump's likely approach here could be basically pressuring Europe to reduce dependency on Russia and pushing for US energy exports instead. Now, we can all have the Biden administration to thank for that, as he already set that in motion, which has led the German government to basically collapse recently, and creating the likelihood of a snap election in the coming months. I understand why Trump is taking this approach personally. It's an old geopolitical proverb: keep Russia out, Germany down, and American in. For Trump, it's all about maintaining Europe under American economic influence, of course. The third main focus: China relations and Asia Pacific strategy, trade and technology wars. Trump could continue tariffs and restrictions, viewing China as a strategic economic competitor. Trump's own statements here is that he has called for decoupling of the US economy from China, emphasizing America first in its trade. Now, this could again benefit Trump's America First policy. However, I'm not sure if corporations would agree to bring jobs back to the US, as many still prefer offshoring jobs due to the lower cost of producing products and services overseas, for American consumers, of course. Now, regarding Taiwan defense and the South China Sea predicament, Trump's policy on Taiwan could see increased military aid, though he might also focus on trade over military maneuvers in Asia itself. Many have predicted that he might increase support to Taiwan as a counter to Chinese expansion in the South China Sea, of course. He could do that, but he might also face backlash from his supporters, who are tired of focusing on other countries, instead of sticking to the American first idea of prioritizing America alone. Now, whatever happens in Ukraine could impact how both China and Taiwan perceive American commitment. Let's say, for example, if Russia wins, Taiwan might conclude that American support won't ultimately save them, which could give China a more dominant position in East Asia, of course. Now, US China Russia triangle. Handling both China and Russia will be a very delicate thing for Trump, as he might see this as an opportunity to drive a wedge between them. Some analysts speculate that he could try leveraging Russian relations to keep China in check, but this risks strengthening one power over the other. I think it's too late for that, honestly. The Western sanctions, which, mind you, have failed against Russia, have actually pushed them even closer in trade and cooperation with other powers. Trump can try, but after the failed peace agreements with Russia, where Western leaders admitted they lied to Russia, I just don't see Russia ever coming back to the West in terms of trade and or trust for that matter. Now, the fourth, Middle East strategy and relations with Israel. Iran nuclear deal. Now, we all know Trump basically exited the original nuclear deal and has stated he would not re-enter it without total reform. Increased sanctions or a new negotiations might be on the table. Basically, Trump's own stance here is that he has called Iran basically a top regional threat, favoring maximum pressure over diplomacy, in his opinion. Honestly, that ship has sailed a long time ago. Especially with the Middle East now being in a very chaotic state right now, it doesn't seem like this would affect that current state. Iran wouldn't even care, to be honest, if it got sanctioned again. Now that they're in the BRICS organization, it wouldn't really matter to them at all, as that is basically their way of circumventing the Western sanctions placed upon them. Not to mention, after what Trump did to one of their top generals back in 2020, they are probably never going to have any other deals with America, for the foreseeable future, of course. Now, Gulf state relations. Trump prioritized economic deals with Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and he may continue arms deals while avoiding human rights debates. Speculations on them by some pundits predict that he will continue supporting Saudi led coalitions while maintaining U.S. influence through defense and trade. I mean, sure. However, the United States should also understand that the Gulf states are also moving more or so towards the BRICS organizations themselves, as this could complicate America's trust with the Gulf states overall. But other than that, of course, America needs to establish good relationships with both Saudi Arabia and the UAE for oil and gas purposes. Israel and Palestine territories. Trump's policies were pro Israel, with speculation that he might further entrench his position. Analysts speculate that Trump could double down on the support for Israel, especially if peace negotiations are off the table. Yeah, Trump has mostly or rather has been one of the best allies to Israel. There's no doubt about that. However, ever since what happened last year in October 2023, Trump's demeanor has slightly changed, as he has promised his voters that he would call Benjamin Netanyahu to immediately end the war as soon as possible. Though the question is, are we really going to be able to do that if we just ask politely? And also, what would it look like if such, you know, asking of ceasefire would look like in general? Would Israel be more inclined to sit down at a negotiation table? And would Hamas? Now, that is a specific question I think we would be more eager to see, but we again shall see. So, the fifth, rebuilding U.S. alliances and global influence. Now, global diplomacy. Trump often prefers bilateral agreements over multilateral commitments, a trend likely to continue. Trump's statements, he has expressed frustration with multilateral organizations, suggesting he might seek agreements that favor the U.S. directly. I can see why Trump would be having some frustration getting any bilateral deals or agreements with allies and foes alike. Though it's probably because of who he is that other leaders are unsure if those agreements will stick or if they will fall, since Trump plays the unknown card in all directions, as we can see from his first term in office. For example, with the talk that Trump and perhaps Putin, who has recently said he wouldn't mind talking with Trump, might cause issues with NATO agreements with Ukraine and other NATO member states. And for that reason alone, that is why global leaders will not trust him to hold his end of the bargain, as they say. Now, trade agreements and economic diplomacy. Trump often pushed for renegotiated deals. Many speculate he'd bring back America First trade. Analysts believe that he may attempt new deals with the EU and Asia Pacific nations, balancing trade and strategic interests. The new deals, for example, if he does propose one to the EU, might not go well for the EU member states, but for America, of course, it'll go well in boosting the economy. Now, with Asia Pacific nation states, the only three countries that will do great for the trade agreements are South Korea, Taiwan, and Japan, that I can think of off the top of my head. In terms of being favored for growth and better trade agreements, compared to China, for example. All right, 6. Immigration policies and global response. Border security and refugee policies. Trump has proposed stricter immigration laws and often tying immigration issues to national security. Trump's stance, he basically has called for stricter immigration caps and asylum policies. He would be correct here, as any nation should prioritize their own national security, and that includes the country's borders. No exceptions. The relationship with Latin American leaders. Trump has sometimes taken a transactional approach with Mexico, negotiation policies to reduce U.S. bound migration. He may continue outsourcing immigration enforcement to Latin American governments, but this could impact the regional stability, which will depend on how other Latin American leaders view it. Some, like the Brazilian president, are more neutral with Trump, while Argentina's new president loves Trump. Now, the other two Latin American countries that may be concerned with Trump being back in office would be Mexico and Venezuela, as their leaders have brought concerns with issues of internal matters here in America, with both having migrants come illegally through the southern border, and with Mexico unable to handle the cartels, which Trump has recently declared that he would use military enforcement to actually handle them, and also with the consent of the Mexican government to allow such actions to be fulfilled. So, to summarize all of this up for you guys, I think Trump's foreign policy is a lot better than Biden's stagnant foreign policies, which hasn't really accumulated to anything except for more misery, more conflicts that are currently unresolved as I'm speaking. And I think, especially now with Trump being elected, a lot of things have changed immediately. You have now Putin saying, hey, I want to talk with Trump now. You also have China saying, hey, let's be on good terms. I'm not going to push your buttons here or there. Now you're also having both Israel, Hamas, hopefully potentially coming to the negotiations table. And you also have Ukraine kind of panicking, but they've been kind of panicking whether it be Trump in office or whether it would be Kamala in office or even, God forbid, currently with Biden in office. But I digress. Now, that is the current state of my thoughts on this. I do believe that America will be heading in the right direction if, of course, Trump can maintain these policies, but that also depends on what happens, with lobbyists, military industrial complex individuals, and other Congress or senator members that might stall for such policies to be enacted. So, other than that, if you can please leave a like and subscribe, I would greatly appreciate it. And you guys have a great day. Bye.